If you were a citizen of the United States and you decided one day that you wanted to move to Canada, you'd be in for a huge surprise. You'd discover pretty fast that in the majority of cases they won't let you move there. There are some good reasons people might want to move to Canada. Healthcare for one. The major disadvantage is it gets so damn cold up there. But whatever your reason for wanting to move to Canada would be, you would soon discover that you couldn't do it, because they do indeed have an immigration system regulating who can and cannot move there. And most United States citizens cannot. With the possible exception of countries belonging to the European Union, every country in the world has an absolute sovereign right to determine who can go there and who can't. Japan, for example, is and traditionally has been closed to permanent immigration for most people. The European Union has imposed open border requirements on its member nations, and in fact the borders between EU members are so open that you can simply drive or walk across many of them, just like crossing a county line in the United States. And this policy has caused some massive problems for a lot of EU countries in recent years, with acts of extreme violence being perpetrated in France, Germany, and Belgium. One of the strangest occurred in Germany, where a large group of Middle Eastern men who never should have been allowed in Germany to start with formed a very large rape gang and began attacking women in the city of Cologne. One of the reasons for the Brexit vote was the fact that a lot of Britons believe the UK has been seriously taken advantage of by unrestrained immigration, and that such free and open borders have harmed their country greatly. With the possible exception of the EU, the only people who have a legal or constitutional right to enter any country are the citizens of that country. That's what a citizen is. The difference between a country's citizens or subjects and other people is massive. I remember a legal case involving a cross-border shooting death of a person who was attempting to enter the U.S. illegally from Mexico. The final resolution of the resulting lawsuit filed in U.S. courts was that the Constitution does not confer any rights whatsoever on non-U.S. citizens in other countries. The Constitution does not apply to Mexican citizens living in Mexico. The Constitution has no authority in that country except over some matters pertaining to U.S. citizens in Mexico. In the late 1990s, the U.S. failed to rigorously enforce its immigration laws. President Bill Clinton said as much in a speech to Congress. In some ways, what he said was very similar to some of the statements made by the Trump administration, and yet there were no massive protests at that time. Interesting, isn't it? The failure to protect the country by regulating who gets in led to 9/11, in which somewhere around 3,000 people were murdered by people who never should have been in the United States to begin with. I'll never forget, sometime later, after the basic cleanup had been completed and there was a ceremonial reading of the names of all the victims. After reading each name, one of the readers would add the word American. But the people who perpetrated that murderous act were not Americans. They were people who should never have been allowed in. The first duty of every country in the world is to defend its own citizens. This is the top priority, the most basic function of any national government. The preamble to the U.S. Constitution refers to providing for the common defense. When the same preamble refers to promoting the general welfare, it mostly means the general welfare of its own citizens, American citizens. The 7 countries included in the current refugee bans are extremely dangerous places full of extremely dangerous people who want to come to the United States and do some really bad things. Are people so naive that they believe it is that easy to sort out the good from the bad? How do you successfully vet people who want to move to your country from a chaotic, war-torn region? And it's important to remember, even U.S. citizens, people who are known by other people, often do things that nobody thought they would do. You see it, hear it, and read it in the news every day. At least I do. If someone wants to come to the U.S. from Somalia or Syria or Iran, do you think they can actually present a list of character references in their home country and somebody can just pick up a telephone and call those references? even if you could get such calls through, which is questionable in itself, how would you even know for sure who you were really talking to, especially in a war-torn region? How do you know that educational credentials from some of those countries, often mired in chaos and deep poverty, are even legitimate? How can you be sure that companies people say they've worked for even exist or not? Do you actually believe that those countries can or will check a person's criminal record and give the results to United States authorities? Not likely. And even if U.S. authorities could get criminal history reports from home countries, the fact is that most crimes simply go undetected in those countries. Many forms of criminal behavior are much easier to get away with in those chaotic, war-torn, poverty-stricken countries with nobody but the victims ever knowing anything about it. So going after criminal records in war-torn, chaotic Middle Eastern countries isn't going to tell you very much, even if you could get the information. You also have to remember that much of the economic activity in those countries is off the books, black market stuff. And a lot of people sort of live off the land and engage in some type of barter system rather than working so-called legitimate jobs. The point is that it simply isn't that easy to discern the good from the bad, and often it's impossible. Let me repeat that. Often it's impossible to tell the good from the bad in some of these countries. You can even be sure that with U.S., you can't even be sure of that with U.S. citizens who already live here. If someone wants to say, well, the good folks have wives and kids, newsflash, so do the bad guys. So you really can't tell that way. A lot of really bad people are so-called family people. So anyone who thinks he's going to be able to absolutely verify that Safa al-Hamdani worked as an interventional cardiologist at Yemen General Hospital, 3702 Yemen Road, Yemen, it's not that easy in some of these places. It isn't that easy at all. This business of not being able to reliably determine the good from the bad is huge. So all of these things considered, and bearing in mind that a country's first duty is defense of its own citizens, I believe it's better to be safe than sorry. Anybody who's offended by that should listen to this again and carefully consider the points I raised. Based on all the foregoing, I can only conclude that the refugee ban from 7 majority Muslim countries is a good thing, and that protesters are simply being extremely naive. And I want to add one other thing. This hatred that is being expressed for Native American citizens who want their government to do its absolute best to keep them safe is absolutely ridiculous. And it is hatred. There's no doubt about it. We have a lot of politicians in the United States now who seem to actually hate native-born citizens. And we have a lot of citizens in the United States who seem to hate their own fellow native-born citizens. Citizens who simply want the government to do its job and keep them and their societies safe. I can't emphasize this enough. There's a huge difference between citizens or subjects of a country and non-citizens. Citizens have all the rights. Non-citizens don't have many rights. And that is as it should be, because there's no country in the world that can accept an unlimited number of people. It simply doesn't work. So therefore, the only conclusion that I can reach regarding the refugee ban is that it actually is a good thing to do.